Welcome to the Vancouver True Crime Podcast. Today is September 10th, 2019. So this is my third attempt at recording this podcast. And I recorded a podcast on Friday, and I wasn't 100% happy with it, and I felt it needed something more and better clarity. So I re-recorded one yesterday, and again, I found out some very interesting information, and after listening to it, I realized that some of these cases really match some of the earlier cases that I talked about, so I felt that they needed better explaining. And so what I wanted to do with this episode in particular, I wanted to kind of wrap up all my cases that I've been talking about. Some I've been posting online on Instagram, and I've been posting them also on my podcast. And I think it caused a bit of confusion because some people go to my Instagram page and they see certain cases and they hear certain cases on my podcast. So I'm going to recap some of the cases for the new listeners, but for the old listeners, which I truly appreciate both of you, is I'll add some new information, and if you are a new listener, which I truly appreciate again, please go to my Instagram page and you can see in some of the older posts some of the cases that I talk about. So for those that are new, I've been focusing lately really heavy on young athletic men that are going missing in Metro Vancouver and in British Columbia. So the circumstances around these cases that I'm finding all throughout North America and even in other countries around the world, but today I'm going to focus on Metro Vancouver and British Columbia. There seems to be a very odd pattern of young, handsome, athletic, well-adjusted, sharp, intelligent young men that simply disappear for no apparent reason and under unusual circumstances. And that's what the focus on this podcast is today. The sad thing about these disappearances is that their families are so tormented and haunted by their loved one just vanishing and not getting any answers and no closure, in some cases for decades. It's truly troubling and heartbreaking. I couldn't imagine, I have children, if they just vanished and disappeared one day. And I know my kids, and I know their temperaments, and I know their personalities, and seeing nothing that would indicate that this would happen would be truly, truly devastating. So my heart and prayers go out to the families who've been through this. I'm truly sorry. So the first thing I'm going to do with this podcast is prove that young men are going missing. In the next podcast, I'm going to start showing parallels to these cases, to cases that are happening across Canada and the United States. And then the podcast after that, I'm going to start reading expert testimonies who some that do believe what's going on and some that don't. And some that try to debunk it with just trying to make you feel stupid, that if you ask questions, you're a conspiracy theorist and you believe in the flat earth and Bigfoot and Martians and men disappearing under unusual circumstances. Is this a silly thing to question? So I'm going to do my best to debunk that. I don't know why these men are going missing, and I don't have any concrete proof, but I do know that there is a pattern, and the pattern is definitely apparent across Canada and the United States. One last bit of information before I start getting into the cases is that another researcher pointed this out that I was listening to on the weekend, and he says that these cases typically are white males, and the only other racial group that this seems to be happening to are young men that are usually in college that are Indo-Canadian or Indo-American, young students. Their families are from India. And I looked, and sure enough, I found 4 cases in Metro Vancouver that fit this profile. Young Indo-Canadian men who are great kids in school, in university, have no criminal history, no history of depression, and no unusual behavior that could explain why they just vanish one day. So I'll be getting into those. I haven't seen this happening under these circumstances to any other racial groups. I haven't seen, like, say young black men that fit this criteria that are disappearing, or other racial, like say Japanese men, but there has been some Chinese exchange students that have gone missing in Metro Vancouver. I haven't really looked deeply into those cases, but those are just like a few that have happened over the last 2 decades, and there's not a pattern. There's not like 4 Chinese people that go missing in 1 month, where there's definitely more than 4 white young males that have gone missing in a month time under unusual circumstances that are very similar. The other last thing I want to add too is that when a body is recovered, not so much in Canada, but more so in the United States, is that they're usually recovered in bodies of water in areas that have been heavily searched by search and rescue people and volunteers. So for example, if they disappear 2 weeks later or a month later, they're found in an area that has been heavily searched by volunteers and search and rescue, and their bodies appear that they haven't been in water for the amount of time that has gone by. So that is something that's worth noting. There is a case in Canada which I'll get into today, where a young man went missing. His body was found in water, and a year later by a kayaker in an area that was heavily searched. So yeah, this is strange stuff. So these are some early cases that are early 90s. And one of the strange patterns is that there are people who either live in Canada or they're from outside of Canada traveling to British Columbia, and they go missing. So in these cases, these are young men who are here to see family or for a vacation or backpacking or hiking, and they vanish. Robert Angelo Ferguli, missing since October 10th, 1992, Squamish, British Columbia. 5'11", 150 pounds. Robbie moved from Ontario's Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, and he was living in Squamish with his young girlfriend and his young daughter, and was employed at a grocery store. Robbie's family last heard from him via telephone in 1991. Allegedly, he was last seen by his girlfriend with a man known as Larry. No one has ever heard from him since 1991. Disappeared. Charles Horvath Allen, 20 years old, went missing in Kelowna, BC, Canada. Researching a lot of these cases outside of Vancouver in the province of BC, seems like Kelowna is a hot spot for men who vanish and go missing. Charles John Horvath Allen, a resident of Yorkshire, England, has been missing since August of 1989. His case is considered cold, and he's presumed deceased by the RCMP. But his mother, Denise Allen, has never stopped trying to find out what happened to her only child. In the spring and summer of 1989, Horvath Allen was backpacking his way west across Canada. He stopped in Ontario in mid-March, Saskatchewan at the end of March, and reached Kelowna, British Columbia in early May. Once in Kelowna, he registered at various employment agencies and then accepted a job at Flintstone Bedrock City Amusement Park. In mid-May, he registered at the Tiny Town Tent and Trailer Park on Lakeshore Avenue. At the time of his disappearance, Horvath Allen was living in a tent at the Tiny Town Campground and was keeping in touch with his family via fax. The last confirmed sighting of Horvath Allen was on May 26 when he cashed his paycheck at the Orchard Bank in Kelowna. An unconfirmed sighting also places him at the Live Wire nightclub in Kelowna in August. If valid, it was the last time he was ever seen. Horvath Allen was reported missing after he failed to finalize plans to meet up with his mother in Hong Kong, where they were going to celebrate his 21st birthday and his mother's 40th birthday. All of his personal possessions, including his tent, clothing, sleeping bag, shaving kit, rosary, photographs, were located at the tiny town trailer park after he was reported missing. Rumors suggested he was murdered near the trailer park. It was also speculated that his body was thrown into Lake Okanagan. His body has never been recovered. No charges have ever been laid. Horvath Allen's case has been featured on the Unsolved Mystery TV show, and his case has been featured on numerous websites, including I Am Missing, Help Find the Missing, and YouTube. Denise Allen, who resides in England, makes regular trip to Kelowna to make public appeals to find her son and some justice. She has a memorial website dedicated to her son and has written a letter to her son's killer. Charles' grandmother, Edith Thorpe, has prepared a personal plea to the public regarding her grandson, but sadly died suddenly of natural causes Sunday, January 8th, 2006. Her funeral service was held in Cambridge. A place also was prepared for Charles to lay to rest with his nana when his remains are recovered. A memorial headstone was placed on his grave during the service. The Horvath Allen family also released an emotional plea to the public. In September 1988, my grandson Charles came to visit me in Cambridge, England, before setting off on his long journey to Canada. We waved goodbye to one another at the bus stop. I feared that I would never see my grandchild again. The tears poured from my eyes. Another Christmas has come and gone without our family knowing the fate of my only grandson, Charles. Soon I'll be 80 years old. If you know who took Charles from our lives, and if you know where his body's located, please find the courage to come forward. For 16 years, I helplessly watch my health of my daughter, Denise Allen, deteriorate as she drags herself across Canada and the world in hopes of finding the fate of her only child. Whomever took Charles from our life, I beg you to come forward and tell us where we can find him. Peace desperately needs to be brought to our lives. Edith Thorpe, Nana of Charles John Horvath Allen. One thing I want to add is that Lake Okanagan is a very deep lake. And I remember when another young man went missing, but in this case it was a boating accident and he fell overboard. And they even hired a submersible submarine team to look for the body, and the lake is so deep that they're unable to ever find the bottom of the lake because it's so deep. And then when you get really deep on the bottom of the lake, it's so heavily with soot that the visibility is almost impossible. So recovering bodies in Lake Okanagan is extremely difficult, and it also probably makes it a perfect place to dump bodies too. One thing that I also want to say before I get into another case, and this is for young people that might be listening to this. Now, if you're not from Canada, and if you're from Canada, especially if you live more in a rural area, you understand that Canada is not what Hollywood makes Canada out be, Mounties and maple syrup, and we're all friendly and we say a boot, which never heard any Canadian ever say a boot. Canada has a very violent subculture, and there's a lot of violent people in Canada. And because Canada is very spread out geographically, it makes it makes being caught by law enforcement very difficult, because you can go to another isolated area and pretty much hide, and especially these smaller towns that are more tourist oriented, and there's a lot of dangerous people, and there's a lot of violent criminals in Canada. So people coming here, I've never understood, and I see a lot of Europeans and young Europeans. I've even seen young, very attractive girls from Europe that backpack, and they almost have this oblivious nature of just traveling around to these isolated, communities. And there's so many cases, even recently, of a woman from Belgium who was backpacking, and she got murdered in a small town in BC by some creep. I might profile her case in a later episode. But again, Canada's not the rainbows and sunshine that a lot of Americans tend to think of. It's like, no, not all Canadians are friendly. Some are very violent and very dangerous. And I feel that a lot of people come here and they really let their guard down. So, and the other thing is that researching these cases, and I think women know this, because I think women are, they know this through experience and probably scary situations, especially in bars. And I've worked in the nightclub industry for quite a long time. So when I was about 19 years old, I got my first job as a bouncer. And from about 19 years old to almost 30 years old, I worked exclusively in bars and nightclubs. I even got hired by an entertainment group where I had to manage talent across Canada, and I had to go on the road with them. So I had to deal with the contracts and accommodations and make sure they got paid and deal with any type of rough situation that could occur. So I've been to bars and nightclubs and pubs right across Canada, from Victoria, BC, all the way to Halifax, Nova Scotia. That's about 3,000 miles, give or take. And I've seen a lot of violent stuff. I've seen a lot of sketchy stuff go down. I've seen people get heavily intoxicated and put themselves in dangerous situations. And when I first started, the worst thing you had to worry about is someone getting too drunk and something bad happened. But then around the mid-90s, drugs really started to come into the clubs. People started doing E, and there was a horrible drug that I truly hated, because I usually had to deal with the aftermath, is Special K. And people would go and basically almost go into a coma right on the dance floor, and I'd see girls doing this crap and getting just completely blasted. And if I saw that, one, I would put a stop to it. I would send them home, but I would make sure they got home safe. That was always my policy. I would take them to a cab if they were sober enough, and I would look the cab driver in the eye and say, "You're going to take her home, right? There's not going to be any funny stuff, right? I have your cab number." I'd take a picture of their driver's license. I'd put the fear in them that if anything happens to this girl, it's not going to, I'm going to blame you. And it's scary out there. People are getting intoxicated, putting themselves in really bad situations. And this happens to guys too. There was a bar that one of my friends worked at. It was a bar in downtown Vancouver called the Roxy. This was around late kind of 90s. And there was this guy that was going after straight men. What he was doing, he was pretending he was just like a buddy, bro, cool guy. And he would befriend young men in the bar, and he would get them really drunk, and then, of course, invite them back to his place, and then he would put GHB in this drink, and he would sexually assault them. So these are dangerous things happen to people. And when you're intoxicated, if you're doing drugs, or you put yourself in a situation where you can get slip drugs, it might be lethal. So what I would ask, if you're a young man or a young woman or anybody, do not drink in public. Drink at home. Drink at your friend's house. Don't drink in public. The more intoxicated you are, the more likely a predator can take advantage of you. So there's my public service announcement. Todd Fraser, 29 years old, missing August 1998, Vancouver, BC. Todd's family is still searching for answers to Todd's disappearance. He was living in Vancouver when he disappeared. He was supposed to attend a concert with some friends on August 7th. He never showed up. He's been missing ever since. Todd is 6'2", 190 pounds. He has brown hair. He has green eyes. He has a scar over his right eye. Both ears are pierced. And he has a scar on his left foot, and he wears glasses occasionally. Todd was last seen August 7th, 1989, in the vicinity of West 10th and Birch Avenue in Vancouver, BC. He stood his friends up at a concert and hasn't been heard from since. His belongings were all left in his apartment. There was a sad poem addressed to loved ones that was found laying in his room. No other clues or information has ever came forward to resolve this case. An active Facebook page is still active of Where is Todd Fraser? He's terribly missed by his family and loved ones. Trevor Nathan Coleman, 26 years old, missing October 1999, Vancouver, BC. Trevor was last seen at a party. He was about to move out of his apartment end of September. All his belongings were left in his suite except for a backpack and a bike. Trevor's backpack was found at English Bay, full of books. Trevor's bike was never recovered. So English Bay is a beach in the downtown Vancouver area. He is 6'1", 190 pounds, blonde hair, blue eyes, and this case is extremely cold. Trevor was a UBC, University of British Columbia engineering student, and again, there's nothing clues whatsoever of why he disappeared and any indication that it ever will be solved. To the families, I truly sorry. Robert Hoffman, 24, missing December 2002, Vancouver, BC. Robert was from Germany and he was staying at a backpackers hostel when he was reported missing. There's been no sign of him ever since. Chris Rafael Skoreski, 16, missing June 2002, Coquitlam, BC. He left a party with some friends. He hopped on his bike and was never seen since. His case is extremely cold. Chris is described as 5'11", 150 pounds, blonde hair, blue eyes. And that's all the information I can find. Manny Sidhu, 17 years old, missing since 2006, Abbotsford, BC. This case has some strange parallels with the case of Jeffrey Sertel that I profiled in the part 1 of this, in that short part 1 of Missing Men. So if you look at the Jeffrey Sertel in Mission, BC, this case has also a lot of strange similarities. I'm going to read an article from the Abbotsford News. Manny Sidhu of Abbotsford has been missing for 10 years and still no answers. Older brother AJ speaks out about the impact on his family, their hopes to solve the mystery of their loved one's disappearance. This article was written by Vicky Hopes, March 30th, 2016. When his family home near Rotary Stadium in Abbotsford went up for sale a few years ago upon the parents' divorce, AJ Sidhu couldn't bear to see it go. It was where he had so many fond memories growing up with his sister and his little brother, Manveer, who everyone called Money. AJ, 10 years older, helped change Money's diaper when he was a baby and thought of him almost as his own child. When Money hit his teens, the two forged a strong brother bond, with AJ often counseling and guiding his spirited sibling AJ and looking forward to see what the future hold for Money. That day has never come. Today, March 30th, marks the 10th anniversary of Money's disappearance. He was 17 years old, just 3 months shy of his graduation from J.W. Morat Secondary when he went missing. To this day, there's been no solid leads to the family, so desperately wants answers. What happened to Money? It's still a puzzle, said Abbotsford Police Constable Ian MacDonald. On the evening of March 30th, 2006, Money returned home from hanging out with friends. He spoke briefly with AJ and AJ's wife before asking his mom, Kashmir, to make him breakfast the next morning. He was last seen going to his second floor bedroom at 10:30 p.m. At approximately 7:30 a.m. the next day, Kashmir went to Money's room and found his bed empty and his blinds and windows open. The bed has been made up to look as though someone was in it. Money's wallet, passport, eyeglasses, contact lens were all left behind. AJ, now 37 at the time of this article, recalls a panic in his mom's voice that morning. Money was a very good kid who always checked with Kashmir where he was going, and she immediately knew something was wrong. AJ tried to reassure his mother that Money has probably gone out for the evening and who'd be home soon. He was an athletic kid who often exited the house by leaving through his bedroom window and jumping on the ground. It wasn't like he was sneaking out. It was more that, I don't need a door, AJ laughed. AJ and his mom began calling Money's friends and discovered that many of them were receiving texts from Money's phone number saying that he was on his way to India. But AJ said those messages were written in a tone and style that was unlike Money, and the family didn't believe he would go on a trip without informing them. The family reported Money's disappearance to the police, who soon discovered surveillance video at the Abbotsford airport of a person they believed to be Money. AJ and everyone in the family thoroughly reviewed the footage and all ruled out that it was him. But there's been no further lead since. AJ said the circumstances has taken a toll on the family. Every time they hear a news report of a body being found, they wonder if it's Money. Every time they hear about a missing person, it dredges up the pain. That's the hardest part, is not knowing. There's no closure whatsoever. AJ, a rap artist who runs an independent record label called Thuggish Record Inc., said the first couple of years following Money's disappearance were the worst. His mind would constantly play out scenarios that might have happened to his brother. He turned to alcohol, losing his driver's license in 2006 for 5 years when he passed out at the wheel while impaired. He feels fortunate he didn't hurt himself or anyone else. He stopped drinking after that. After his parents' divorce, AJ brought the family home that now live there with his wife, his 14-year-old daughter and son, who are in high school graduation year, is precisely the same age as Money was when he went missing. His mom lives there half the year and spends the other half in India, while his dad lives elsewhere in Abbotsford. AJ's son, who has fond memories of his uncle, has taken over the bedroom that used to be Money's. His son feels at peace in there, says AJ. The family believes that someone has information about Money's disappearance and hopes after 10 years they'll be no longer able to withhold it. There is an ounce of hope that hopefully something good comes out of it. But I'm not stupid. I know there's a very, very high percentage of chance that he's no longer around, AJ says. If his brother's no longer alive, there'll be no funeral until we have proof, he said. I'll never go there until we have some evidence of what happened. Money's disappearance remains an open file at the Abbotsford Police Department. If anyone knows anything, please put the family at ease. Please come forward with any information. Money was 6'1" and 150 pounds, and he lives in an area outside of Vancouver called Fraser Valley. The Fraser Valley is made up of a bunch of cities and townships, and Mission, where Jeffrey Sertel was from, who was also 6'1" and 150 pounds and 17 years old, and also last seen by his family going up to his bedroom Very strange coincidence indeed. In a previous podcast where I profiled two young men that went missing, I profiled Jeffrey and also a young man in Calgary. To see more information on that, you can either go to my Instagram page, Vancouver True Crime, and find the post, or you can just look at my, I think, 2 podcasts ago, and it's a short podcast, and I detail the strange events around Jeffrey Sertel. Gagan Sandar, date June 23rd, 2006. Surrey RCMP is still actively looking for information regarding the whereabouts of a missing 17-year-old Gagan Sandar, last seen in the evening of June 17th, 2006. Gagan is a South Asian or Indo-Canadian with black hair, brown eyes. He's 6'1", and he's 225 pounds. He was last seen wearing a brown t-shirt and a black Guess jacket and white loafers. His vehicle is a beige 4-door 2001 Toyota Corolla. He is an honor roll student, and him and the car is missing, and this case is cold. Family came as far as Toronto and Indiana to help with the search, but there's been no leads in this case. Brian Bromberger spent the evening of May 1st, 2007 playing video games and watching television at a friend's house in New Westminster, BC. During the early mornings of June 1st, the 18-year-old teenager said goodbye to his friends. He got into his 1988 red Honda Civic and began his 5-minute drive home to Burnaby. Brian never made it home. The very next day, police located Brian's vehicle at the George Derby Center, the senior complex where Brian's grandfather lived. This location is roughly 2 minutes away from Brian's house. When police searched the vehicle and the surrounding area, they noticed that the car's headlights were on. Brian's identification was inside the vehicle, the door was unlocked, and the keys were missing. The authorities contacted Brian's parents, who just returned that day from holidays, and told them that their son's car, has been abandoned and towed. Brian has never been found. Brian is 18 years old, 6 feet tall, weighs 185 pounds. He has blue-gray eyes and brown hair. Brian was last seen wearing a black t-shirt, shorts, a white Adidas runners with no laces. He left his friend's house around midnight because he had to work the next day. There's been no solid leads in this case. It's a cold case. But there was one despicable incident. A man named Soki Hussein sent the family a ransom note trying to make money off this horrible tragedy. Police investigated and arrested the man. And just absolutely disgusting. What a disgusting person. The family's extremely devastated. And again, like all the other cases, extremely cold, no developments, clues in their son's disappearance. On my Instagram page, Vancouver True Crime, I did a video about Brian Bromberger, and I go into more detail around that case. If you go on my Instagram account, you can see some other details about this case. But at the end of the day, it appears to me that he's been abducted. And in a lot of these cases, that's what it seems what's happening to these young men. There's a lot of theories about why they're being abducted. I will get into that in the next podcast. In the next podcast, I'm going to talk more about the similarities to these types of cases in the United States and the theories behind why are these young men being selected and abducted for unknown reasons. March 13th, 2001, 24-year-old Scott Anthony disappeared. Diversed was last seen leaving his residence around 11:30 at night. He said he was going to a corner store in Aldergrove and he would return 5 minutes later. He never came home. He's described as 6 feet tall, blonde hair, green eyes. He was last seen wearing black and white Adidas shoes, a black Umbro toque, green cargo pants, and a green jacket. This case is cold. There's been no updates or any new clues on this case. Kevin Allen Fletcher, 36, last seen on Friday, February 29th, 2008, around 11:30 p.m. in Surrey. He left a friend's house and he was heading home to his residence in Maple Ridge. He never showed up. Fletcher is described as a white male, 5'10", 200 pounds, well-built. He has short brown hair, blue eyes. He was wearing a white t-shirt which had vertical blue and green stripes, blue jeans, a black baseball cap that said Dino printed on it, a black leather jacket with Kevin Fletcher written on the sleeve, a logo of a drilling machine, and Yellowknife print on the back of the jacket. A light brown suede shoes. He was driving a 1990 Oldsmobile Cutlass 4 doors. This case, again, cold, and there's never been any developments on this case. I remember this next case, Kellen McAway, because it was in the media quite a bit back in 2008. I did a post on it on my Instagram page, which is Vancouver True Crime. And this case really haunted me because the police released this very eerie video clip of a man in a winter coat with a hoodie, kind of like a parka winter coat with fur trim, and he was wearing a DC backpack, and they showed that clip quite a bit on the media, and it really has an eerie feeling. I posted the picture on my Instagram page if you want to have a look at it. So Kellen Charles McAway, 25, was last seen March 19th, 2008, around 9 p.m. He was leaving the Keg restaurant in Langley, BC. He was having dinner with some friends, and he was parked across at the Colossus movie complex. He spoke to his friends by cell phone and drove off. Several days later, McAway's bronze 2006 Honda Civic 4-door was found abandoned on a quiet residential street, only a couple miles from his apartment. McAway did not show up for work at the Rogers call center. He didn't contact family or friends, which was highly unusual, and he has no history of going missing, no criminal record, and the Lower Mainland Vancouver Metro Integrated Homicide Investigation Team took over the case a few weeks later, and at the start of the investigation, they said the disappearance was highly suspicious. On March 28th and April 2nd, 2008, Burnaby RCMP released surveillance images of an unidentified male in Kellen McAway's apartment building. The man was wearing a hooded, puffy-style winter jacket with fur around the hood. He also was carrying a DC skateboarding brand backpack. In July 2008, it was reported by the CBC News that police officers on the Integrated Homicide Task Force announced they received information indicating that McAway has met with foul play. Corporal Dale Carr said the police were not able to reveal what they've come up with. Only they had enough information to support their suspicion of foul play. Police has said they've not been able to make any conclusive links to gang, drugs, or organized crime as being responsible for the disappearance of Kellen McAway. The family is now offering a $100,000 reward for information that will find Kellen McAway's remains and to bring him home so the family can have a proper burial and closure for their son. McAway is 25 years old at the time of his disappearance. He's 5'10", weighs 220 pounds. He's an avid bodybuilder. He has blue eyes. He has a black and white dragon on his left shoulder. And he was last seen wearing a black long sleeve fitted t-shirt, jeans, and a brown leather jacket. I made a video about this case and I posted it on my Vancouver True Crime where I go into more detail. If you're interested in more information around that case, please go to my Vancouver True Crime Instagram page and you can see the video about Kellen McAway. Very disturbing case, and it definitely fits into this bizarre pattern of young, muscular, athletic men who went missing. However, in this case, there seems to be a little tiny bit of evidence about him being set up for something. I found some writing on a message board about people saying how he was set up for something. He did work as a bouncer. Maybe he upset the wrong, gangster who was drinking, and who knows what the scenario is, but there seems to be some kind of rumor about him upsetting and him being set up for something. So I hope for the sake of the family they get some closure. And if anyone knows anything, please, come forward and give the family some peace. I'm going to do one more before I close this podcast. But before I do, I just want to say is that I've been researching these strange anomaly of these men going missing or being abducted, or some type of foul play happening to them. And I hope you can see now that there's a clear pattern of men going missing under unusual circumstances. And there's definitely something happening to these young men. So in this case of John Keller, he was 29 years old. He disappeared in Mission, BC. John Keller is a resident of Langley, BC. He disappeared on 2007 while attending the King of the Pit 4x4 festival on the mudflats of Stave Lake near Mission, BC with two friends. The festival drew a crowd of more than 1,000 people. Keller was last seen at 4 a.m. having a drink around a campfire. His white Ford F-150 pickup truck was found at 6:30 by one of his friends who left early. It was stuck in the ditch about 200 meters from the campsite. The engine was still running, the doors were still open, the radio was on, and the wipers were on. There was no sign of John Keller. Keller's friends and family didn't start panicking until next morning when Keller didn't show up for his work in Whistler. Whistler is a mountain outside of Vancouver, and it was home of the 2010 Winter Olympics. He was building one of the ski jumps. A police boat, a K-9 unit, a helicopter, 70 search and rescue volunteers scoured the area. They didn't come up with any sign of the missing man. Wasn't until Tuesday, October 21st, 2008, when his body was found floating by a kayaker in Stave Lake. John Keller was 6'2", 230 pounds. He worked as an iron worker. He was an incredibly physically fit man. He had no history of criminal involvement or any type of activity or any enemies to know of. What I find most bizarre about the John Keller case that no one talks about the obvious is how does a body stay intact and float a year later? And, the most basic investigator or anyone that knows anything about forensic knows that a body in water doesn't float after a year. So that really caught my attention, and it definitely matches these cases that are in the States where an area that's extensively searched and then a body appears in an area where it's been searched in water. So at least in this case, the family did recover a body, which is something that most families don't get. So I'm going to read one last article, and this article kind of ties up everything, encapsulates all these cases, because after this podcast, I think I'm going to go, as I said, I'm going to go right into the cases in the States, and then I'm going to go more into kind of theory and testimony of experts of what they think is going on. And then the next podcast after that, I'm going to start into the missing women, the highway of tears, that lots of women are going missing, the women that are going missing in the downtown east side, the mass scale of Indigenous women that are going missing across Canada. And then I'm going to go into the Robert Pickton case, who was a serial killer in Port Coquitlam, BC, him and I believe other people, I don't think he was alone, and I'm going to present that, why I think that we're killing women on a large scale. According to my research, there was over 80 pieces of individual DNA evidence found on this pig farm. So something horrible was going down there, and I'm going to share the details in that. This is an article from Sandra Thomas. I read part of this article on my Instagram page in a video I made, but I'm going to read it again for my podcast listeners. So this was written in May 21st, 2008, the Vancouver Courier, Sandra Thomas. Missing. Dozens of young, healthy men have mysteriously vanished in southwestern BC in recent year. Many of their families suspect the disappearances are connected. Police say no. Chilliwack resident Michael Scallion, 30, last seen in Agassiz, April 10th, 2008. Burnaby resident Kellen McAway, 25, last seen in Langley, March 19th, 2008. Langley resident Derek Kelly, 32, last seen at Bridge Lake, January 1st, 2008. Langley resident John Keller, 29, last seen at Stave Lake. Burnaby resident Brian Bromberger, 18, last seen June 1st, 2007. The day after Mother's Day, Jane Keller is missing her son John. He was healthy, sociable, had no connection to crime. He vanished last fall, a case that baffles police. As in too many families in the Lower Mainland, he's part of a growing list of painful, mysterious missing person cases. More than one parent wonders if their disappearances are connected. Too many mothers are missing their sons, says Jane during an interview from her Langley home. May 25th is National Missing Children's Day in Canada, but some groups are using the date to call attention to all missing persons regardless of their age. In the past several years, much media attention has deservedly been given to the missing women of BC, besides the missing women and murdered women of the downtown east side. The subsequent trial and conviction of serial killer Robert Willie Pickton BC is home to the Highway of Tears, a stretch of Highway 16 between Prince George and Prince Rupert. Initially, 9 women were listed as having gone missing and found murdered along the stretch of highway since 1989. Actually, in my research, it's actually 1969. Maybe it's a typo. Last year, police have expanded their investigation and added 9 names to the list, but families want attention paid to the dozen missing men who have gone missing in the last 4 years in the southwestern BC. Using archives from newspapers, the Courier began with a list with almost 60 missing men, with possible explanations for their disappearance such as mental health or physical problems, senior and frail health, probable suicides. Those known to police with links to gangs and drugs were eliminated. leaving a list of 40 missing men. The Courier cross-references the remaining names with 15 RCMP Municipal Police Detachment, followed up newspaper articles and Crime Stopper websites to determine if any of the remaining men have been found dead or alive. In total, a dozen have been located. But unfortunately, less than a handful of these men are alive. There are more men missing, but because the Courier could not confirm their status, they're not named in this article. The remaining 22 healthy, apparent happy men from southwestern BC have simply vanished. Rumors of a possible serial killer at work is growing. But police departments discount any connections in this case. On a side note, it's worth noting that, again, remember, this article is written in 2008, and in my research, the most active year of men going missing was 2011, where I found over, about another 40 men that went missing in between the time of 2010 and 2011. And it's also worth noting that men who fit this criteria are still going missing. I recently posted about a young man who moved from Edmonton for a job in Vancouver. Handsome young man, muscular, I would say very good looking, vanished. And this is a very recent case, and his poor mother's distraught. There's a GoFundMe page, raised $10,000 for him. And so this is still going on. This is still happening. So again, remember, this article was written in 2008. The GoFundMe page raised $10,000 reward for any information for Christopher, spelt with a K, Sean Cotier, missing January 25th, 2019. I did a post on it on my Instagram page if anyone wants to see it. But yeah, just Google his name, and it's very disheartening that this is still going on. So anyways, I'll continue on with the article. Vancouver resident Richard Tomasi, 42, last seen April 15th, 2008. Vancouver resident Greg Sir, spelled C-Y-R, not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, 42, last seen August 26, 2003. Vancouver resident Ron Carlo, 32, last seen June 20th, 2007. North Vancouver resident Matthew Price, 22, missing July 15th, 2004. North Vancouver resident David McMorrin. John Keller was attending a 4x4 truck festival at Stave Lake, located between Maple Ridge and Mission, November 4th, 2007, when he disappeared. Keller, who was living in Whistler for 6 weeks before he disappeared, was last seen partying with friends at 4 a.m. Hours later, his white Ford F-150 truck was found in a sinkhole. The truck was running, the windshield wipers were operating, the radio was on, the doors were open, and Keller's cell phone was inside. There was no trace of him since. Mission RCMP Sergeant Greg Pride says, police thoroughly searched the area for Keller with no luck. It's strange. We searched up and down and followed up leads and reached a dead end. The family keeps in regular touch with the RCMP, and there's no leads in their son's disappearance. Jane and Randy spent most of their weekend at Stave Lake searching for him. We put up posters, we talked to people. Says Randy, it's all we can do. The couple says many people attending the annual King of the Pit festival that weekend were convinced that somebody must have seen something. We just don't know why they don't come forward, says Randy. The Keller family posted a $25,000 reward for information leading to John's exact location. Crime Stopper offers a $2,000 reward for information leading to an arrest in the case. Len McAway pins missing posters to the bulletin board at a coffee shop located in Walnut Grove near Langley. The weather outside is sunny. The poster is asking for information about his missing son, Kellen, goes up next to the missing poster of Derek Kelly. McAway does not miss the physical similarities between the young men on the posters. If you put their pictures side by side with a picture of Brian Bromberger, they have the same look. They're all young men. They're all well built. And I've been assured by the Burnaby police, as far as they know, there's no connection. McAway says his son's case with Bromberger and Scullin's case have been transferred to the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team. Kellen was last seen on March 19th having dinner at the Keg Steakhouse in Langley. After dinner, Kellen and his friends went their separate ways. When Kellen didn't show up for work the next day at the Rogers Call Center, where he worked as a trainer, he was reported missing. His bronze-colored 2006 Honda Civic was found on a quiet street kilometers from his apartment. The car was released to his parents after the police searched it for clues and fingerprints. They found nothing, said McAway. It was the same with the neighborhood where the car was found. We organized a search. We didn't find anything. That same night Kellen disappeared, a man was caught on security camera in his apartment building. The man, not a resident of the building, wore a distinctive silver winter coat with the hood pulled up to obscure his face. The police considered the man a person of interest in the case. McAway's father says, as far as he knows, or anyone close to Kellen knows, the 25-year-old had no ties to drugs or gangs. As McAway speaks, his eyes occasionally wells up with tears. When I heard a body has been found under the Knight Street Bridge, I feel sick, but it wasn't Kellen's, he says. It's like a bad dream that won't go away, but I won't entertain the thought of him not coming home. It's only been 7.5 weeks. As with John Keller's parents, McAway, his wife, Paula, are convinced someone must have seen something. If Kellen's friends and acquaintances has any information, including details his son might not be proud of, McAway wants them to come forward. A $50,000 reward has been offered for Kellen's safe return. If anyone knows anything, I want them to ask them, please, to call Crime Stoppers. It's anonymous, McAway said. It's all we can do is keep our fingers crossed. Derek Kelly's sister, Leanne Kelly, revisits the places where she posted pictures of her brother. I want to keep them fresh because 1 month went by, then 2 months, then 3 months, then 4 months, she says, fighting back tears. Like the other families, Kelly sees physical similarities in the missing men, but cannot find any other connections. She also can't believe that all these men have literally vanished with no sign. These days, you can't even drive through a red light without someone taking your picture. How can these boys just disappear with no signs? She added, in the case of her brother, no one attending the New Year's party at Bridge Lake reported him missing. The person he drove with came back without him, she said, and didn't even report him missing. She adds, tragic as a car accident or a drive-by shooting might be, at least there's a body with some closure. Every one of these boys are big, and a big part of their families. Every one of them is unique, she said. They're a huge missing piece of each one of these families. Chilliwack resident Brandon Thomas DiRenzo, 20, last seen October 4th, 2006. Abbotsford resident Barrick Brasson, 26, last seen at Loon Lake, July 25th, 2007. Surrey resident Ravir Ron Atwell, last seen April 5th, 2004. White Rock resident Wade McKenzie, 23, last seen North Delta, January 16th, 2008. So I want to thank you for listening to the Vancouver True Crime Podcast. I'm going to continue on my next podcast, as I said, profiling these cases and comparing them to other bizarre disappearance and abductions of young men across North America and even parts of Europe. So to be continued. Thank you again for listening. I really appreciate your interest and support so much. Thank you so much. Have a good.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.